Hello, hello, and welcome back. 'Tis I, Julian Greystoke, your favorite book reviewer, and apparently your favorite book reviewer of dinosaur books. Because if I had a nickel for every time a patron has asked me to review a dinosaur book, I'd have 2 nickels, but it's weird that it happened twice. No, it's not the same patron. Apparently my patrons have just decided I read dinosaur books now. That's right, you can hop on over to my Patreon, and at a certain level you can boss me around and convince me to read certain books. I do still have veto rights, so don't get your hopes too high up that you're gonna make me read 50 Shades of Grey or something. Yeah, you can get me to read a book, and this person saw that I had read one dinosaur book that I did not like, and they were like, aha, well unfortunately for them, they enjoy the book that I'm about to talk about, and they hope that I would find it to be just as entertaining. And I unfortunately did not, and found myself really, really struggling to force myself through this book. Dear patron, this is your warning. I'll say what I liked at the beginning here, so that if you want to just bail and not watch me tear this book that you like to tiny little shreds, this is the perfect time to do that. But before we get into what I like or didn't like, I am going to first read the blurb, so hold on to your butts, we're reading the blurb, and then we'll get on to what I liked about the book. The book is The Dinosaur Lords, and the blurb goeth thusly. Men and women live in paradise, specifically men and women, definitely no non-binary people, live in paradise, but dinosaurs predominate. That is untrue. From what we've seen in book 1, this is a series. Colossal plant eaters like the Brachiosaurus, terrifying meat eaters like the Allosaurus, and most feared of all, the Tyrannosaurus Rex rule the land. Not from what we've seen, they are doing very little ruling of the land. Most of the dinosaurs we see in this book are domesticated. Seeking to centralize real power in his figurehead fanged throne, Emperor Philippe of Nueva Europa sets off a chain of wars that may blaze up and consume the continent called the Tyrant's Head. But is imperial ambition the only spark, or are more sinister forces at work? And so we have our players. Fallen hero Kirill, I think it's pronounced Kirill. It looks like it could be Carl. Carl,
that kills people!
Kirill I'm gonna try to pronounce this, Bogomirsky. He's like Russian. Who gets lured into the quixotic task of raising an army from the... Oh my god, this author. I'm glad I didn't read this on the page, because they are just so, like, verbose, and I swear, like, they just want to show off their vocabulary. Raising an army from a province of pacifists, hard to say. Part-time dinosaur master and minstrel and full-time rogue, Rob Corrigan. I would not once in this book classify Rob as a rogue. He is as unroguey as they come. Who wants to be paid and laid, but he follows the man he's written and sung about into what looks like certain disaster. Princess Melodia, we'll talk about her, who is eager to escape the shadow of her indulgent but neglectful father, the Emperor, and the Imperial champion, I can't remember how to pronounce his name. I think it's Jom? I think it's Jom. I'm sorry for pronouncing it wrong. Court of the Flowers, the Emperor's most celebrated swordsman and poet. All of these men are warrior poets, every single one. Who wants to serve beauty and the right. Who wrote this blurb? Beauty is capitalized. He wants to serve beauty, capital B, and the right. R is not capitalized. But what can he do when faced with 2 equally wrong and ugly choices? Wow. I didn't really read the blurb before I got into this book, and I hate that blurb. I have never stumbled through a blurb so hard. I mean, it technically tells you what's going on, but it does give you an idea of the writing style that this book has. Dense, wordy, a lot of names, a lot of politics. But I didn't hate everything about this book, and I'll tell you what I did like. For once, we have a book with animals in it, albeit those animals are mostly dinosaurs, that, like, treats them as individuals with personalities. And I really, really liked that aspect. Each dinosaur that we get to spend any time with is like a living creature with a personality, with likes and dislikes. You get to see them interacting with their humans and how they feel about their humans, and the different, like, breeds of dinosaurs have different personalities and habits depending on like their breed. It's like, I love that stuff. And there's a little bit of dinosaur husbandry. I honestly wish there was more. Like if this book had to be dense and wordy, I wish it was dense and wordy about animal husbandry and not about politics and countries that I don't give a fuck about. But my main thing that I liked is anytime that we were spending time with dinosaurs as animals, I thought it was really well done. I feel pretty comfortable saying that Victor Milan, who wrote this book, is probably an animal lover. And he did include more obscure animals like ferrets. There is a ferret in this book. It's not a main character. It comes up a couple of times. I'll talk a little bit about something to do with the ferret later on. But they didn't just go with like the standard pets of dogs and cats, but in this culture, ferrets are like valued as a companion animal, and I appreciated that. So that is kind of about where my praise begins and ends. Oh, I did enjoy some of the battle tactics that we got to see. This author went way too overboard, and we'll talk about that, but I do love me some warfare tactics. I just wish that this author could have done it in a more dynamic and less wordy way. So it's the way it was done, but I liked that it was present. All right, those are the things that I liked. Did not like much else about this book. This was pretty torturous, I have to say. I had a really hard time convincing myself to go back to it. Like, after I'd finished a session with it, I'd be trying to do anything else besides. I would listen to ambient silence before wanting to dive back into this book. One thing I did want to do that will probably annoy the patron, if they keep watching past the point of me talking about the things that I like, is that this patron kind of accidentally held this book up as like, well, at least it's better than Fourth Wing. And that made me think about this book in the context of Fourth Wing, and I don't think this book is necessarily better than Fourth Wing. I think this book is Fourth Wing for boys. Fourth Wing is Fourth Wing for girls. Dinosaur Lords, Fourth Wing for boys. We'll talk about why. And this patron, if I may out their gender, is a guy. So it makes sense that they would like Fourth Wing for boys. I don't like either of these books. I didn't like Fourth Wing or Dinosaur Lords. But if anybody wants to accuse me of like ripping apart a book written by a man for being so very evidently written by and for men, know in your heart that I shred books written by women all the time. I am not precious about books written by women. In fact, most of my channel is me ripping apart books written by women. So like if you're about to be like, it's just some feminazi tearing apart a book written by men, please look at most of my channel. So, friends, let us go to my notes, which are on my phone, because I took notes while I was listening. The plot of this book is incredibly simple. It's really hard to discern from this. But the plot itself, incredibly simple. So basically we have two super awesome uber heroes, sort of on opposite ends of the war. We have the one guy, the Russian guy, Carl. I know that's not how you pronounce his name, but I'm probably just going to call him Carl. Carl, on one side, he's a disgraced warrior. Even though he's Russian, he is basically a disgraced samurai archetype. That's what he is. He's very stoic. He's very like, I just don't care about the world. I'm sad and depressed, but also I have honor. And I have, he's very upright and just, but quiet and stoic. So he's disgraced samurai guy. And then on the other side of things, we have Imperial Champion Jean. I don't know, it's sort of French sounding, I think, who is... These two guys are going to end up clashing, I think, in a future book. I thought they were going to clash in this book. They're kind of on opposite ends of this war that's happening, accidentally on the part of the disgraced general guy and the samurai. But yeah, they're kind of on opposite ends, and I thought they were going to end up clashing in this book, but I guess we're saving that for another book, because as it turns out, this book is mostly revving up for future books, and you guys know I hate that. I want a book to stand on its own, not just be leading you on to future books. I do not want, when I say I don't like a book, I do not want to hear you say, oh, well, you have to read the second book before it gets good. No, fuck all the way off with that. The first book should be good. So like if you're tempted to be like, oh, but Julian, you just have to read more, the first book should be good. If I don't like the first book, I'm probably not going to like the second one. Anyway, whole rant. This book made me angry. This book made me angry, and we'll find out why. But yeah, the plot is very simple. And so we got these two men who are doing their own things. Jean spends a lot of his time in court. Like the entire first half of this long-ass book, he's just in court, doing courtly things and being a warrior poet. And then eventually he goes out and he starts to move his army, I believe, best I can tell, in the direction of the samurai guy who spends most of the first half of the book not on page. But they're eventually going to clash. So the samurai guy, as it mentioned in the blurb, he's training up a city of pacifists, a monastery and surrounding village of pacifists, how to defend themselves from the oncoming army, which I believe is led by Jean. If I am understanding this book correctly, that seems like what we're going towards. There is so much stuff thrown at you in this book. Like, I will say that this book is dense. This book is one of the type of fantasy books that I don't like, for how dense it is. It's like, here's just constantly political stuff being thrown at you, names being thrown at you, countries being thrown at you, history being thrown at you. I don't care. I don't care. If it's not coming up in this book, I don't care. If you're setting it up for book 2, I'm not going to remember it because there's too much. There's too much stuff. I am not that type of nerd. This is not my type of high fantasy book. If you're the type of high fantasy book reader who loves all of that dense nonsense and just wants to know all of these things and wants to know like every single political machination that's not even going to really matter in this book, then this one might be for you. I don't know. So one thing about this book is that it starts out with a disclaimer that's basically like, this is not Earth and it never was Earth. It's, in my opinion, it's a lazy excuse because he didn't want to have to come up with cultures. So he stole a bunch of cultures and languages and stuff from Earth and put them in his world, this world is basically just a sandbox of everything that this author liked and thought would be cool. The rule of cool is very much just this book. The author was like, I want to write a book with dinosaurs. I want to write a book with magic. I want to write a book with this, that, and the other. And I don't want to explain why they're here. So I'm just going to say, get over it, essentially, in the disclaimer. I'm going to just play the disclaimer for you.
One thing you should know. This world, paradise, isn't Earth. It wasn't Earth. It won't ever be Earth. It is no alternate Earth. All else is possible.
So to me, that's basically the author being like, don't try to make sense of this. I just wanted to play with all of these elements. That's Earth-like, but it's not Earth. So, don't come at me if nothing makes sense, because it's not Earth. That's what that feels like to me. That's what it tells me as a reader. So we've got things like countries that essentially we have Spain, we have England, we have Russia. These are existing things that the author can play around with their language and their cultures and kind of do whatever he wants with the plausible deniability of being like, yeah, they just happen to be extremely Earth-like, but I don't have to explain why. He's not interested in explaining why. He wants to play in his sandbox and doesn't want to have any implications from the real world. Fine, whatever. I guess I can get past that. It's his book. That's an indication to me that I need to turn off my brain and not think about any of the world building and why anything is the way it is, because it just is, because that's the way the author wanted it. The first character that we meet is Rob. We talked about him as the minstrel, dinosaur guy, rogue. He's not a rogue. Rob is kind of supposed to be the everyman character. And he is apparently really into dinosaurs. He's a dinosaur master, and you see that a little bit, but really I wish we saw more of it. A lot of things are told to us about Rob. We just keep being told over and over again that Rob is certain things, but we don't really get to see it as much in action. Rob is a bard, but he doesn't do a whole lot of barding. Rob is a dinosaur master, but he doesn't do a whole lot of dinosaur mastering. He has a dinosaur, and I love his relationship with the dinosaur that is his, but ultimately, in this book, we don't really get to see him, except for at the very beginning here, doing that job. And apparently he's a rogue, but he's not even slightly a rogue. Later on, he charms a girl by virtue of the fact that the author thought it was time for Rob to have sex with someone. Not because he's inherently charming or roguish at all. I'm picturing this short pot-bellied dude, really average looking, because we don't get gushing about his handsome physique like we do with the other two men. Rob, in the beginning, we see Rob turn the tides of battle with dinosaur strategy. Rob is the battle, we are losing the battle and we need to do this, and he uses superior strategy to defeat his enemy. Cool, great, that's awesome. That's the coolest thing Rob does this whole book. The rest of the time, you will see, very boring person. But hey, that's cool. Oh, and there's a prologue in this book, which is a shepherd boy encountering, I believe they're called gray angels, which are probably the most interesting element of this book for me, possibly because they come up so little. They come up very little. They're clearly going to be a bigger thing in upcoming books, but they are these angels, heavy quotations. They have angel names, but later when you hear them talking to each other, they talk like modern Americans. So like, whatever. But they're big and scary. Like they're this horrifying, inscrutable creature throughout this book that may have their fingers in like fate and the workings of the world. We don't know. They're interesting. But we just see one being really scary at the beginning of this book, and then we don't see them again for quite a while. And then there's a epilogue where they talk to each other. But that's our prologue. Farmer, shepherd boy, encounters a gray angel, and then is made to forget that he encountered one. It's just to kind of set them up. In the battle, we learn that one of the bad guys has an albino T-Rex that he rides around on, which actually to me seems like a terrible idea considering the health effects that albinism has on a lot of creatures. For example, that T-Rex might be blind. Or that T-Rex is definitely very vulnerable to sunlight, especially its eyes. If it's a true albino, it's probably a pretty sickly T-Rex, but not in this book. It just because the author wanted a cool T-Rex. We do switch POVs in this book, and it's hard to follow in the audio. I don't necessarily think it's the narrator's fault, but because there's no visual like break, I imagine in the book there's something visual to show you that we are like switching POVs. But because it is limited for the most part, except for sometimes when it's not, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But for the majority of this book, it is third person limited with whoever's POV we are in for great chunks of time, but it is hard to tell when we've switched. And I think it's probably because there's a visual cue in the printed version, but I was listening to audio. We meet one of our heroes. I'm going to call him the samurai because that's what he is, even though he's Russian. The samurai, we meet him during one of his deaths. Apparently he's been killed a few times and just won't die. I'm sure we'll find out more about that in the next book. You're going to be hearing that a lot from me. I'm sure we'll find out more in the next book, which, as you know, pisses me off. At one point, he gets like severe head trauma, but he's still extremely lucid and articulate. And the book points that out. And like pointing it out doesn't help. Just being like, it's weird how like lucid and articulate you are even with the severe head trauma. What does that solve? Why is he so lucid and articulate? You never find out, except for that he's just that cool. And that's something about both of our lead men, aside from Rob, who is actually more of a side character. Even though we're in his POV, he's a side character whose POV we're in. It's very weird. But our two actual lead men are just special and better than everyone. And just that's all you need to know, which is a thing that reminds me a lot of Fourth Wing, and is one of the biggest connections is that our main characters are just awesome and better than everyone. Then we meet the princess. You notice how I didn't bring her up when I was talking about what the plot of this book is? It's because she doesn't matter to the plot. And I have a lot of issues with the princess in this book. And this is one of the ways right away, this is going to annoy some of you, but this book was written by a man, and yes, it is men writing women, like the worst kind, like boobing boobily.
Yes, I am going to be talking about men writing women, and yes, I do mean a specific type of men, usually straight men, let's be honest, writing women. So if you're about to go into the comments and be like, oh, but what about gay men? Just, that's not who I mean, okay? It should be fairly obvious who I mean. There's a certain subset of men who write this way, and I'm going to be talking about them. If you feel like that applies to you, maybe do some soul searching, and if you know it doesn't apply to you, then it's not about you. Anyway, carrying on.
Yeah, so we meet her. They are like the Spanish archetype, and of course, she's a spicy Spanish girl. Ooh, you know, she's a little bit sassy and very sexy. So right away we have that exotification, is that the right word? Exoticization of a Spanish woman. And that continues throughout. But right away, the first time we meet her, she's naked. She's naked a lot in this book. Incidentally, she just happens to be naked the first time we meet her. I don't know why that would be, except for that this was written by a man and he wanted to picture her naked. And also, she is having big emotions, TM, like women do. I have written down in my notes, it did take the author longer than I expected to mention breast size, but we got there. I don't know what it is with guys. I mean, I do. Men writing books, I have a challenge for you, okay? You're writing a book, and you have women characters in it. Your challenge, this is apparently level impossible. Your challenge, do not mention their chest at all. Not even to incidentally, offhandedly mention, oh, it's big or it's small, or not at all. Never once. And you know what that's going to do to your book? Nothing bad. It is not going to make your book worse in any way if you never mention your woman character's chest. And some guy's going to be in here, well, I'm writing erotica. I'm not talking about erotica. This isn't erotica. This is a fantasy book. This is a high fantasy book. The size of these women's chests is immaterial to anything in this book. We do not need it. It's just because this was a book written by a man. And some of them seem incapable of writing a book without letting you know the chest sizes, at least the chest sizes of the women. I'm going to be complaining about the women characters in this book a lot, so if that bothers you, you might need to bail out of this review. Because this is atrocious. This is atrocious. This is men writing women territory, for sure. I should have saved some of the lines in this book to add to the men writing women subreddit. But the first time we meet her, she is naked and she is with her retinue of women servants. She has a whole bunch of women servants and courtiers around her at all times, which you would think would make for a prime way to pass the Bechdel test. We'll talk about that in a minute. There are way too many characters in the scene for me to keep track of. We're just told things about them, like these are all of their personalities. They don't matter. But then we find out that our main character is not like other girls because she doesn't like fashion. She's sitting there tits out, but don't worry, she doesn't like fashion. She's not like other girls. I have breasts are mentioned again. Men writers simply cannot resist. All right, so this is our first scene full of women only, that does not pass the Bechdel test. Girls just want to talk about boys and having sex with boys. This is obviously all just fantasy on the author's part. This guy, Victor Milan, wanted to write a book that was all of his fantasies combined, and his fantasies include dinosaurs, super awesome kick-ass men with no flaws, and women with their tits out talking about being horny for men. But yes, this is our first time in a scene that is only women that does not pass the Bechdel test. What is the Bechdel test, if anyone is wondering? It is the bare minimum, the barest of bare minimums for writing women characters, which is simply two named women characters in a scene that talk for more than like a single line about something besides a man. Bare minimum. We have not achieved it in one scene that is only women. So we're close because we have named women talking to each other, but they're talking about men. Then I have the Fae are apparently a thing in this world. This world is just whichever mythologies this author wanted to include it because he thought they were cool. So Rob is kind of like the Scottish one, and he believes in the Fae, like they're kind of like his gods, the Fae. What are the Fae? Do they actually exist in this world? Completely unclear. We'll probably find out more about it in future books. Take a drink every time I say we'll probably find out more about it in future books. And once again, we have written a fantasy world. Could we have anything except a like extreme patriarchy? No, absolutely not. Don't be stupid, Julian. We can't have that in our fantasy world. It's too unrealistic. Dinosaurs, yes. Women in power, no. You might be like, well, she's a princess. Yeah, but she's doing that princess thing where she can't rule because she's not a boy. She has to marry somebody to have power because she's not a boy. Naturally, of course, their cultural norm for women is being scantily clad in courtly settings. That's just the cultural norm. The author couldn't possibly have done anything about that in his book that he wrote and made up. It's fine if your book is filled with badass wish fulfillment. If your characters are wish fulfillment archetypes, I mean, I don't love it, but it's fine. It's not the end of the world. But is it too much to ask that I get to participate in that as well? Like, at the very least, in books like Fourth Wing, where the main characters are all super awesome and always win, we get both a woman and a guy who do those things. But in books like this, only the men get to be super awesome and always win. If we're going to be having the power fantasy wish fulfillment, why don't I get to participate? And I know what you're going to say. Maybe it's in future books, but it's not in book 1. So this book that I read, book 1, does not get the points for maybe it becomes more of a thing in future books. So Rob, he ends up stumbling. Rob gets like disgraced in that battle that he helped win or something. I don't know. He gets separated from that arrangement. He's not actually a soldier. He was just employed to be like their dinosaur master. So now he's roaming around and he encounters Samurai Guy, who somehow escaped death yet again or was brought back from the dead. He has an encounter with like a goddess of death at one point that was very confusing and doesn't come up again in this book. But he's alive and he's missing an arm. And Rob encounters him and immediately has the biggest man crush ever on this guy. I think the author gave Rob a woman later to sleep with just to prove he's got a case of the not gaze, because Rob is head over heels with this guy. He immediately attaches himself to this man as his like one-man hype squad, and that's all Rob does for the rest of the book, is just think about how awesome this guy is. Talk about how awesome this guy is. If we were ever in doubt that this dude is awesome, Rob is here to set us straight. It is, again, very similar to Fourth Wing in that way. The same thing happens with Violet, except for we're in Violet's point of view. But everybody's jumping through their ass to praise Violet and mention how cool she is, even her enemies. And the same thing happens to both of these male leads in this book. But Rob is our personal point of view character who exists to talk about how cool one of these guys is. Carl, if you will. How cool Carl is. Probably annoying the crap out of my patron for calling him Carl. His name on the page, it looks like Carl. Anyway, Rob's job is to blow smoke up this guy's ass 24/7. My patron mentioned that there was an enemies to friendship in this book, and I think that's what this is supposed to be. But it's really like those enemies to lovers stories where they're not really enemies. If this is enemies to friendship, it's only enemies loosely on paper, because in reality, in practice, Rob immediately finds, latches on, and is head over heels for this guy. And this guy, not opposed to having Rob around as his little toady / personal praise squad, one-man praise squad. So that's their dynamic through this whole book, is he's just like, oh my God, this guy is so cool. He's so cool and everything he does is cool. And anything he says is correct. And anybody who goes against him is wrong. Wow. So I wanted to like Rob as the everyman, but that's all he does the entire book, is just shit himself over how cool Carl is. The beginning of this book, pretty much entirely the first half, if not more, is mostly just info dumping about stuff that doesn't matter in this specific book. So much info. We're at the court and we're just hearing about politics and scenes about politics, and then scenes about how horny the princess is, and then back to a scene about politics. None of it matters. This book is so long and has so many words. There are so many scenes that I would cut out of this book and feel like we've lost nothing at all. Another way that this is like Fourth Wing, and it had me wondering, are these authors being paid by the word? This world has fat equals evil. If you're wondering, I'm getting some of these things from my bad book bingo card. So if you're new here, I do read-alongs where I break out a bingo card and we have all sorts of things on it, such as everyone praises the main character and fat equals evil. Now the author tries to make up for the fact that they have obviously written the most stereotypical women in all of fantasy by having them practice martial arts. Why, look, in their country, it's normal for like princesses and stuff to practice with the sword in case they need to defend themselves. But it is too little too late. And then, of course, during the practice session, a girl fight breaks out with hair pulling. I have all the main men are some brand of stone cold warrior poet. They all are. They are all amazing fighters, but also like write poetry or sing or have like some other like very poetic angle, because they're all wish fulfillment self-inserts for the author. This is the weirdest plot point. So you remember how I said Carl had his arm lopped off? Early in the book, a witch or something gives him some magic that he doesn't believe in that regrows his arm. So he grows his arm back Deadpool style. And then he has an arm for most of the rest of the book.
About the size of a KFC spork.
What is that plot point? Why chop off his arm and just regrow it? Why not just have his arm injured if you need his arm not to be in play for some reason, even though it does not matter. The fact that he regrew an entire limb magically meant, like, if I took that out of the plot, nothing would change. And it was kind of set up to be like, oh, Carl here doesn't believe in magic, even though he's like died twice but didn't die. He doesn't believe in magic, and then his arm is regrown. But he never interrogates it. At least in this book. Again, maybe it happens in the next book, but in this book he's like, I regrew my arm magically. I still don't believe in magic though, and he just carries on as though it never happened. It is never remarked upon again. The man regrew an arm. Where is this witch? Why aren't they going back to her and being like, nope, you're coming with us, you're one of our team now? I got all excited when we first met this witch to have like an important female character, but no, she's just in that scene to give him the potion to grow his arm back. That's it. We have a person who can grow back limbs, and she never comes up again.
Is it supposed to be stupid?
One of the scenes with the princess and the general guy, what was his name? I'm gonna have to keep checking back here. Jean. The princess loves Jean a lot. Like, a lot. And so here's a scene with them together. Most of them are like this. Oh no! The princess's super hot warrior poet general, for whom she is endlessly horny, is sad. Luckily, women are genetically programmed to be perfect, gentle therapists, so she notices and asks immediately. He gets to tell her a story about how badass he is and also how sad. But he keeps some things back from her because her gentle woman heart couldn't handle the true depth of his man pain.
Do you hear? That is the sound of ultimate suffering.
And for whatever reason, even though it really doesn't happen anywhere else in the book, the author head hops in the romance scene. I guess we have to know how horny they are from both of their points of view. That's important somehow. I have the world building is simultaneously a lot and very lazy. For some reason, they have a pope. One thing I noticed is that almost all of the animals in this book are female, and I don't know why. Is this intentional on the author's part or subconscious? It's not just the dinosaurs, because I was like, well, maybe female dinosaurs are like more trainable than the males, but it's every animal. There's dogs that we meet, they are female. There's horses we meet, they are female. I think the ferret that we meet is a female. I don't understand what we're doing with that, except for maybe the author subconsciously realizes that he has written so few interesting women characters that he's trying to make up for it by making all of the animals girls. This also has kind of the same, again, the fourth wing problem of if there are dragons in battle, what good is like the infantry? What good are the people on the war horses? Because they also have war horses. But the dinosaurs are the strongest, and the book even says when the dinos move in, they turn the tides of battle. First of all, what's the incentive to be in an infantry in this world? Because you're just going to get eaten or stomped on by a dinosaur. But also, like, what on earth is a war horse going to do against a dinosaur? Like, I get horses for travel, because not everybody has a dinosaur. But if the second the dinosaur knights come riding in, the battle is pretty much over, what are the infantry for? But they're here, because we gotta have lots of faceless people to kill. There is a ferret, which is exciting. However, it beeps or peeps. It was hard for me to tell in the narration. I think it was beep, like beep beep like a horn. Ferrets don't make a lot of noise to begin with, but they don't beep or peep. They do make a sound which is called duking, which is sort of a chuckling noise. So this author could have mentioned that the ferret was chuckling if he didn't want to use the word duking. It's very quiet. It's a very quiet sound. They don't beep. So I'm not sure what was up with that. At this point I'm over a quarter of the way and still waiting for a plot besides a vague threat of war and horniness. We have another scene with all women, but it still does not pass the Bechdel test. I am never worried about any of our main dudes. They always win. Similar to Fourth Wing, I'm never worried about the main characters because I know that they're better and stronger than everyone, and so they will not lose. We briefly head hop to an opponent of Jean's, just so we can have an everyone praises the main character moment, so we can hear that even an enemy is thinking about how awesome Jean is. If I was reading this book on my own, I would DNF at the dino jousting, if not before. It could be cool if it wasn't just another thinly veiled reason to hear about how cool Jean is. Like, you think dinosaur jousting? Oh my gosh, that sounds really amazing. This author finds a way to make it boring, mostly because it's just It's just the Jaume is so cool hour. We have to hear about how cool he is. In case you missed it, he's really cool. And then we have a sex after jousting scene, just like in The Knight's Tale. And did we need to watch the sex scene? I don't think we did. It could have been Fade to Black. This is a high fantasy story, not a romantasy, but there is one explicit sex scene in it for some reason. And of course, the characters have to take a minute to throw shade at people who don't want sex. There is some asexual shaming in this book, unintentional, I think, on the author's part, but twice I clocked characters mentioning how people who don't want to have sex are like unnatural, they're party poopers, they're weird, they're missing out on the one thing that's like good and human. Yeah, so like if you're familiar with asexual erasure, you'll be familiar with a lot of those arguments that we have heard so many times. It's very casual asexual erasure. I don't think the author set out to do that. It's kind of a toxic way that all asexuals can come to think.
I am going to take a moment here to point out that Jaume is our queer representation for the book, however. He is a bisexual man, and when he's not boning super hot princesses, he's running around with his, like, fighting unit of gays. Seems cool, like, on the outside, like, yeah, he's the badass bisexual who gets the princess and has his unit of battle gays in his back pocket. Except, unfortunately, that while he is very clearly bisexual, we don't get like any queer affection in this book. All of the affection that we see is pretty straight. I'm using affection rather than other words that will make YouTube angry. At one point, he kisses another man on the forehead, not the mouth, like the forehead. And that's as close as we get to our queer affection. There are also 2 women who are side characters who are gay, but mostly we see them fighting with each other because their relationship seems to be extremely toxic and like they just fight until they do other things. So yeah, the queer representation in this book is weird and not actually that well done, but hey, at least it exists. And if you are a bisexual who wants to live vicariously through imagining that you have a hot princess on one hand and a team of warrior gays at your beck and call on the other hand, I can see the wish fulfillment.
Every time the female character takes her man's hand, we have to hear about how strong and calloused it is. We have to. We keep being told things about Rob on repeat, like, for example, he's good with the dinosaurs and uses an axe. Ask me how I know. We finally get a hint that women are allowed in the faceless ranks of archers and pikemen, but not the cool named warriors who ride dinosaurs, at least at this point in the book. Put a pin in that. The princess's hot lover goes to war and she weeps about it. Women things, you know. Rob started to get on my nerves at this point. Like, he had some very creepy thoughts about how older women are more grateful for sex. It was gross. Icky. Icky Rob. No. Rob really, like, objectifies women a lot when he's not thinking about how amazingly awesome Carl is. Then finally, Rob and Carl get a plot. Over halfway through the book, they finally start doing things. And it is your classic seasoned warrior has to train up a bunch of peasants to defend themselves plot. Think about what that plot usually entails. You're correct. The peasants are at first very unwilling to be trained, but then all of a sudden something happens and all of the peasants are suddenly willing to be trained. Now, this is a question for my dinosaur fans out there. If you're watching this, you know who you are. Do we think that dinosaurs would sweat? Because the dinosaurs in this story sweat, and it's mentioned multiple times, the dinosaur is sweating. Scientifically, is that accurate? As much as we know about dinosaurs, would they sweat? Then I have this author can fathom a nerdy painter guy who wants to learn to fight, but not a single woman peasant who wants to defend their home. So, like, when all the peasants gather to be trained, no women at all. In fact, a character even pointed out how no women came, but he doesn't say that that's unusual or that he's sad that no women, like, came to defend their home. He's just like, yeah, it's all dudes. The author can conceive of a smaller, weaker dude who wants to be trained as a warrior, but not a woman who wants to be trained as a warrior. In this new town, we have 2 named women. One is the bitchy one in charge of disagreeing, and the other is just a hot girl who's there to prove that Rob is not gay. He stares at her tits and watches her bend over. And Rob is fast becoming one of my least favorite characters because as this book goes on, he's getting creepier and creepier. Meanwhile, we cut back to the princess who, without her man, immediately starts thirsting after a different man and seriously considers cheating on Jean with this other guy just because she's unbelievably horny. At one point, the princess says to herself, "My cinnamon-skinned young body." Straight to jail. Please, put this author in handcuffs for me, please, and thank you. And not in the fun way. The princess is at a masked ball, but she's not wearing a mask because she's not like the other girls. Did we mention that? And then there's a sexual harassment scene, which we did not need and could be cut from the story. It's there for no fucking reason. And later, there will similarly be an R-word scene that could be cut from the story. Rob gets nookie from the woman he was ogling because of course he does. This could be cut entirely and we would lose nothing except gratification of all the guy readers who identify with Rob. We keep hearing about, again, this is kind of like Fourth Wing, we keep hearing about how Carl has screaming nightmares, but we never actually see it. We're just told that it happens. And that's the exact same thing that happened in the second Fourth Wing book. We're told that Violet has been having nightmares, but we don't actually see them. Finally, well over halfway through the book, we're like in the final stretch of the book, we find out that there is one Lady Dinosaur Knight. She, I think, eventually comes onto the page and gets like 3 lines, but also we need to know that she's not sexually attractive because at one point she was assaulted and disfigured by the man who attacked her. So like we finally have a warrior woman, but she's not allowed to be classically hot. She had to have been assaulted. Honestly, we could replace any of these men with a woman dinosaur writer and nothing would change. Like, I don't understand why this author is so obsessed with keeping such rigid gender roles. Like, why not have the disgraced warrior be a woman? Why not? Nothing that they do is so inherently masculine, aside from being a cool badass, that they couldn't be a woman dinosaur knight instead. Except for I'm kind of glad that they're not, because then we'd have to hear about their boobs all the time. I'm very curious which animals are in this world and why. Apparently sheep and wolves do not exist, but dogs do. My note now is I'm ready for this book to end, but it just keeps going. Even the necessary scenes drag. Is this author being paid by the word? The people that our heroes are training up to be peasant warriors are a group of pacifists that remind me very strongly of like the Way of the Leaf from Wheel of Time. Makes me wonder if maybe they're inspired by that. I don't know. I wonder, what is the barrier to entry to becoming a dinosaur riding warrior? So like, what do you have to do to become a dinosaur knight, or even just somebody who fights from dinosaur back? Like, could a random peasant go out and befriend a dinosaur and suddenly be kicking ass in battle? What's the barrier to entry? This is when I realized one of the reasons, because we're getting more fighting now in the second half of this book, and I realized that this author does that old-fashioned, and he is an older author, I went and looked at his profile, so he's an older guy, that old-fashioned style of fight choreography where it is blow by blow. Every single movement is on the page. You know, he raised his right arm to swing onto his enemy's shield, but his enemy raised his shield fractionally, but that left his right shoulder open for attack. It's so blow by blow and meticulous, and that is not the type of action that I like to read, so I was bored there as well. Rob is fast just getting on my nerves. Rob encounters a child whose gender he cannot determine. He calls the child it. Then he decides he doesn't like calling the child it, so he defaults to a boy. Then I wondered if they are domestic and wild breeds of dinosaurs. Kind of unclear. We have another scene where the princess is naked. It's crucial to the plot. There's a palace coup, and I can't keep track of all of these people, but the bad guys must have won because the naked princess gets arrested. Oh no! The artist guy who they were training to fight died. Who could have seen this coming? I didn't care about him. Why would I care about him? But now he's dead. Okay. I guess that's an excuse for Carl to have some man pain because the guy that he was teaching, his little acolyte, is dead. Of course, though, Carl is so stoic in inward, he's outsourced his emotions to Rob because Carl is the stoic archetype that, you know, I'm sure all of the archetypes here are for the guys, you know, and some guys like to be like, I never have emotions. And that's this guy. Days later, cut back to the princess. Days later, the princess is given clothes, but she's still just vibing with her tits out when the bad guy comes for the obligatory R-word scene. The princess does get saved, but of course not before the R-word scene. At least she is saved by one of her women friends and not a man. However, the R-word scene happens and then it's like it never happened. She completely got over it instantly. So like, why is it there? I've talked about this many times before, but if you're going to include something like that in your book, I really, really am going to need you to deal with the fallout that happens, the psychological and physical fallout of having been assaulted like that. But it was just to prove that the bad guy is bad. The princess, like I said, is saved by other women, but it's mostly because all the good men are gone or dead at the moment. And finally, we are wrapping up. I say, then basically nothing gets resolved because this incredibly lengthy book is just book 1. Ugh. I have ugh written in my notes. Because yes, nothing is resolved. All of this build and build and build, and these characters are moving closer and closer together, and you think there's going to be a big conflict when our two main super awesome badass guys clash, and then they just don't. Because this book is just supposed to lead you on to the next book. Then they have an epilogue with the Great Angels, which ruined them for me because they're talking to each other like they're sitting around the office water cooler. So yeah, I have some feelings about this book. I just am so over pretending that these books that are so obviously written by and for men are anything that interest me. And you can hate me all you want for that, but everybody has their own taste in books, and this type of book is not to my taste at all. And it has way more similarities to Fourth Wing than I think the patron realized or intended when they said, well, at least it's better than Fourth Wing. Because yes, it's better than Fourth Wing in a couple of ways. Like the military strategy actually makes some sense, but still not a lot because we still have the issue of dinosaurs and dragons being so powerful in this world that it's like, why are there infantry? And it also had better animal husbandry than Fourth Wing. Fourth Wing doesn't really care about dragon husbandry. It's not interested in that. They both have the same problem of the super uber amazing awesome main characters that you're supposed to just like wish fulfillment put yourself onto. And like there's two different types for all the guys, but they're both warrior poets. They're just different flavors of warrior poets. So we got the stoic one and the sexy one. And you might be like, well, you know, maybe that dinosaur warrior lady comes back much more in the next book. But like I said, that is not this book. That is not the book I read. And I don't want to have to read through a book like this to get to a book that I could maybe enjoy, that could maybe have a character that doesn't like deeply insult me on a fundamental level. Oh, but this book did finally pass the Bechdel test. I forgot to mention it in my notes. But after multiple scenes with women talking to each other, it finally passed the Bechdel test because they are talking about mind-numbing politics, but at least it's not specifically a man. Now, they are talking about countries and rulerships by men. Like all the countries that they're talking about are ruled by men. Tangentially, they are still talking about men, but they're not like directly talking about men. Took a while, but we got there. I was shocked that we got there with so many scenes of just the princess and her retinue of women still not managing to pass the Bechdel test. But we did. We did pass it eventually. Is the bar that is in hell. And this book did manage to just blip over that one tiny bar. Yay, I guess. Anyway, I was actually going to film 2 reviews today, but my voice is already going. So I think this is just going to be all I film today. I hope, dear patron, if you are somehow still watching this and haven't quit because you're sick of my bullshit about a book that you enjoy, you are free to enjoy this book. Just like people who enjoy Fourth Wing are free to enjoy Fourth Wing. But this is not superior to Fourth Wing. This is the same sparkly, nutritionally uncomplex candy as Fourth Wing is. It's just made for a different audience. And you happen to be that audience. So it did what it was meant to do. This book did what it was meant to do. You are the target audience. It did what it was meant to do. And for people who love Fourth Wing, they are usually the target audience, so it did what it was meant to do for them. But as I have mentioned, this is not me saying Fourth Wing is good. I'm saying both are bad. I'm saying both are not my thing. Let me be clear. Both are not my thing. opposite sides of the same coin, though. I just want to throw the whole coin away and get some very different styles of books for me, please, and thank you. Anyway, that's enough talking from me. If you want to read some fantasy that is very, very different from that or from Fourth Wing, very different style, tone, check out my books. I do have a fantasy romance, but it is Fade to Black, so if you're looking for the smutty smut, this isn't the place to find it. And this book is brimming with badass warrior women. So, if you need a palate cleanser from Dinosaur Lords, where women get to do cool things and be badass and just as strong, if not stronger, than some of the men in the story, then I suggest you check out The Wolf and the Hawk. And they do it all without having to have their tits out. Wow! Amazing! Thank you so much for watching today, and don't forget that you can become my patron over on Patreon, where not only are you supporting the channel and my animals, such as my ferrets, but also you can do things like at a certain tier, as I mentioned, you can boss me around and make me read another different dinosaur book, because I guess that's a thing I do now. I really am not a dinosaur person. So this is like, is this going to become a trend of just Julian reads dinosaur books? Oh, I kind of hope not. But anyway, that's all I've got to say. I'll see you again next time for whatever it is I happen to be doing next time. Bye!
Too short for a stormtrooper?
Huh?
You want to know what's not short? My list of patrons. Patrons like Allison, Lisa, Jen, Tex, Moon Island, Zenith, Corey, Ashley, Bunny, Nemo, Tactical Hot Dog, Haley History Nerd, Stephanie, Pixelizzy, Raya, Christina, Cameron, Lady Kragan, Lunar Muse, AJ, Marshy, Semi-Dark, GK, Annika, Jen, Gay Tutter, Tina, Black Nanga, SB Boots, Martha Baggins, July, Bird Anonymous, Sarah, Kat, 78 kilograms of shade, Ingrid, Roma, Haley, Sam, Kira, Mooney, Pudamancer, Kirsten, Bear, Jojo Bookish, Robin, Ursula, Caitlin, Jessica, KJ, Mufflier, Celia, Deborah, Swamp Goblin Waifu, Sophia, Marween, Kit, Hidden Glade, Light Julie, Patrick, Anne Sophie, Callison, Vampire Antihero, Shelby, Zaire, Jesper, Rennie, Scribbling Cat, Savvy, Jenny, and Amanda. As always, all of you, thanks so much for your continued support. You make the magic happen around here.
Carl!
Well, I was hungry, and, well, you know, when you crave hands, that's...
Why on earth would you do that?
I was hungry for hands. Give me a break.
Carl!
My stomach was making the rumblies
Carl!
that only hands would satisfy.